The morning sun rose gently over the Pacific, casting golden light across the waves that hid a secret beneath their calm surface. In the closing months of World War II, a powerful American fighter, the F-4U Corsair, met its fate somewhere off the Japanese coast. Designed for carrier warfare, the Corsair was a beast of the skies, its inverted gull wings slicing through the air with unmatched speed and power. But on that day, the ocean claimed one of these metal giants. No one could have predicted that this single wreck would soon become one of the most valuable prizes in Japan's hands. When fishermen discovered the sunken aircraft tangled in coral and seaweed, they had no idea of the treasure they had found. To them, it was simply another remnant of war. But when Japanese authorities learned of the discovery, they reacted immediately. Orders were sent to recover the wreck, at all costs. Beneath the saltwater corrosion and sand lay something Japan desperately needed: insight into the enemy's technological superiority. As the Corsair was carefully lifted from the sea, its once glorious frame emerged like a ghost of power and precision. The engineers at the Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal could barely contain their astonishment. Even after months underwater, the structure was remarkably intact. The rivets still aligned perfectly, the engine housing held its form, and the airframe revealed craftsmanship beyond anything Japan had produced during the war. For the Japanese military, this discovery was not just luck, it was a rare chance to learn from the machine that had dominated their skies. The Corsair had already earned a fearsome reputation. American pilots called it the Whistling Death, a name whispered among Japanese fighter squadrons with quiet dread. With its 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney double Wasp engine, the Corsair could reach speeds that pushed the limits of propeller-driven flight. Its wings folded elegantly for carrier operations, and its firepower, 6.50 caliber machine guns, could tear through enemy aircraft in seconds. To the Japanese, who were struggling to maintain aircraft quality as resources dwindled, the Corsair represented a level of engineering perfection they could scarcely imagine. When the dismantling began, the Japanese engineers approached it like a sacred ritual. Every bolt, every wire, every piece of fabric covering the wings was documented with painstaking precision. They discovered that while parts of the wing were metal, others were still covered in fabric, a choice they initially mocked as primitive. But the deeper they looked, the more they understood. This was no outdated technique. It was a masterstroke of weight reduction. Fabric where strength wasn't essential, aluminum where it was critical. The Americans had achieved the perfect balance of durability and efficiency. As the internal systems were revealed, admiration slowly replaced skepticism. The hydraulics that controlled the landing gear and flaps were built with extraordinary accuracy. The Corsair's supercharged engine maintained power even at high altitudes, something Japanese engines struggled to do. Every piece, from the magnetos to the propeller hub, demonstrated the precision of an industrial empire untouched by war's shortages. But what truly stunned the Japanese wasn't the complexity, it was the consistency. Every part fit flawlessly, every measurement exact. This was mass production at its finest. The Corsair wasn't handcrafted by a small group of artisans. It was one of thousands built to the same perfect standard. Japan, by this stage of the war, could no longer maintain such precision. Factories bombed, skilled labor lost, materials scarce. Every Japanese plane leaving the assembly line was slightly different. The Corsair, however, represented the opposite: industrial discipline on a scale Japan could not rival. The cockpit offered another revelation. Unlike the cramped, minimalistic designs of Japanese fighters, the Corsair's cockpit was logical and comfortable. Instruments were neatly arranged, each labeled for clarity. Controls moved smoothly, and safety systems, even armor plating, were positioned with foresight. The bulletproof glass, thick and flawless, stood in stark contrast to Japan's fragile canopies. It was as if the Americans had designed not just for war, but for survival. When the report on the Corsair was finally compiled, the conclusion was both humbling and enlightening. The Japanese engineers realized they were not just fighting a nation of brave pilots. They were fighting a nation of machines. The United States had mastered the art of precision manufacturing, where science, industry, and design worked as one. The Corsair was more than an aircraft. It was a symbol of industrial might, a flying testament to the system that powered America's victory. For the men who studied it, the Corsair became a teacher. Every rivet spoke of discipline, every weld whispered innovation. It revealed not just how far Japan had fallen behind, but also what was possible when technology, planning, and production aligned perfectly. They had tried to defeat such machines in the air. Now, on the ground, they could only admire them. The captured Corsair, once a weapon of destruction, had become something else entirely, a lesson in progress. For Japan, the war was nearing its end. But for its engineers, a new understanding had just begun, one that would quietly shape the nation's future long after the guns fell silent. The Corsair's recovery had been a triumph, but what came next would reshape how Japan viewed the art of engineering. When the salvaged fighter was brought into the massive hangars of the Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal, Japan's best engineers gathered around it like surgeons before a vital operation. What lay before them was not just an enemy machine, but a masterpiece, the mechanical embodiment of a nation's industrial genius. The closer they looked, the deeper their respect grew. The first stage of analysis focused on the Corsair's heart, the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine. With 18 cylinders arranged in two perfect radial rows, it represented the peak of piston engine evolution. When the engineers dismantled it piece by piece, they were stunned by its precision. Each component, from pistons to valves, had been machined with tolerances so fine that even a thousandth of an inch could make a difference. Japanese engines, by comparison, suffered from uneven metal quality and inconsistent cooling. The Corsair's engine, however, seemed capable of infinite endurance, a flawless marriage of power and durability. Next came the airframe. The inverted gull-wing structure fascinated the Japanese. It wasn't just beautiful, it was purposeful. The design allowed for a shorter, sturdier landing gear and a larger propeller without sacrificing aerodynamics. Yet, recreating such a wing would have been nearly impossible for Japan in 1945. The precision tools, advanced alloys, and machining equipment needed simply did not exist in sufficient quantity. Every curve and joint of the Corsair spoke of an industry capable of mass-producing excellence. Then there was the armor, something Japan had long neglected. The Corsair carried over 150 pounds of protective plating around the cockpit and engine. To Japanese designers, this seemed like wasted weight. But the Corsair's raw power rendered that argument meaningless. It could climb faster, dive harder, and take hits without falling apart. For the first time, Japanese engineers realized that survivability was not the opposite of agility. When powered by the right engine and built with precision, it was a force multiplier. As they explored further, the cockpit left them speechless. The layout was ergonomic, logical, and even elegant. Every control was within easy reach, the gauges clearly marked and illuminated. It was built not for the machine, but for the pilot. Comfort, awareness, and safety, ideas often dismissed in Japanese designs, were here treated as essential to victory. The seat armor, the bulletproof canopy, and even the reinforced rudder pedals reflected a design philosophy that valued the pilot's life as much as his mission. The more they studied, the clearer the truth became. The Corsair wasn't just a product of brilliant minds. It was the result of a perfect system. American factories had achieved what Japan could not: standardization. Every Corsair rolling off the assembly line in Connecticut or Ohio was identical to the one before it. Parts were interchangeable, tolerances exact, and quality unwavering. Japan, crippled by resource shortages and bombed industries, could no longer hope to match that level of organization. The Corsair, in its silent complexity, revealed that victory in war depended not just on courage, but on the machinery behind it. Weeks passed as the Japanese engineers documented their findings in exhaustive reports. They photographed every inch, measured every bolt, and drew countless blueprints. But their admiration was tinged with something else: realization. The Corsair represented not only how far they had fallen behind, but also how much they could learn. It was no longer the enemy's plane, it had become their teacher. When the war finally ended, American occupation forces discovered the detailed Japanese analyses stored deep within the Yokosuka facility. The documents revealed everything, not just technical notes, but the quiet respect the Japanese had developed for their adversaries' craftsmanship. The irony was profound. The Corsair, once designed to destroy, had ended up educating those it was meant to defeat. In the years that followed, as Japan rebuilt from ruin, the lessons of the Corsair lingered. The same engineers who once studied its wings and rivets would go on to shape the future of Japan's industry. They carried forward the values that defined the Corsair: precision, discipline, and relentless pursuit of perfection. These principles became the foundation of Japan's post-war manufacturing miracle. The very qualities that had defeated them in battle would now drive their rise as an industrial power. The Corsair story, then, is more than a tale of war. It is a lesson in progress, how even in defeat, knowledge can become the seed of rebirth. What began as a wreck pulled from the sea ended as a symbol of transformation. It taught that technology is not merely built with metal and fuel, but with vision, cooperation, and an unshakable respect for excellence. The F-4U Corsair soared across the Pacific as an icon of American air power. Yet, beneath the waves of Japan, it also became a silent teacher, proving that even in the wreckage of war, humanity's greatest victories are often born from understanding, not destruction.